because I have to be clear on this. They don't erupt in violence. There've been I think there were 9 arrests and there've been 5 charges, including people arrested for attacking. Well, I'll run you through it all, actually. There's been a racially aggravated public order offence by a person of no fixed abode who allegedly shouted racist abuse.
Let's be honest, we've all seen this pattern before. Someone calls into a live show, completely convinced they're about to deliver a powerful, emotional argument. And within minutes, that entire narrative starts to crumble under the weight of basic facts. Not because they're malicious necessarily, but because they're relying on feelings instead of reality. And that's exactly what's about to happen here. Before we dive into the full story, comment where you're watching from, and don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss the next one. Now, the caller you're about to hear comes in with a very familiar claim, one that's been repeated over and over again across media and social platforms. The idea that pro-Palestinian marches are nothing more than angry, hate-filled crowds, that they're inherently violent, chaotic, and driven by hostility rather than purpose. It's a serious accusation, and if it were true, it would completely change how these events should be understood. But here's the problem. When that claim actually gets challenged, when someone stops nodding along and starts asking for specifics, evidence, facts, that's where things begin to fall apart quickly, because what starts as a confident, emotionally charged statement slowly turns into hesitation, contradiction, and eventually a position that simply can't hold up under scrutiny. And by the end of this exchange, what you're going to see isn't just someone losing an argument. You're going to see what happens when a narrative built entirely on perception runs headfirst into reality. Watch this carefully, because there's a bigger lesson here than just one caller getting it wrong.
Hi, James.
Hello.
I'll tell you what it is. With so much unrest and so much fear within the Jewish community, most of these pro-Palestinian protests erupt in violence. There's hate that's called out, and I think
no, they don't, because I have to be clear on this. They don't erupt in violence. There've been I think there were 9 arrests and there've been 5 charges, including people arrested for attacking. Well, I'll run you through it all. Actually, there's been a racially aggravated public order offence by a person of no fixed abode who allegedly shouted racist abuse. There's a public order offence after a can of beer was allegedly thrown at a protester in Whitehall. There's been an actual bodily harm charge after an officer was allegedly assaulted and suffered a head injury, which also happened at the Countryside Alliance March a few years ago. And then you've got another racially aggravated public order offence relating to an allegedly racist placard. And then you've got a 16-year-old boy who can't be identified because of his age, has been charged with a public order offence after directing verbal abuse at officers. So you understand I can't let you say they always erupt into violence when they categorically don't.
Well, there is a lot of hate. I mean, they're looking.
Let's
for
not gloss over. Let's not gloss
wearing...
over it. You have to accept that you cannot say they always erupt into violence when they categorically don't.
No, but there are things that that the police
and if that's
won't
the basis
and can't
of
pick up on.
if that's the basis of your position, then your position becomes untenable immediately.
There is hate. Would you not agree with that?
There's hate everywhere. There's hate on the West Bank at the moment. You've seen what the American Secretary
James,
of...
Can I say anything?
Yes, of course you can, as long as it's true.
When you think about the fear that Jewish people are feeling all over the country, something that exacerbates that and something that makes them feel even more scared. I mean, there are no Jewish people that would feel comfortable to go into a Palestinian protest, and even the word
there were Jewish people on it. There were Jewish people on the march, and you've seen the footage from Central Station in New York as well of Jewish people protesting.
They're far extremists, and in terms of their support, their anti-Israel narrative. But that it's not. But if the fact is that people would be scared to go to a protest like that, whereas in direct contrast to that, the Israeli...
But again, I'm sorry you feel I'm interrupting you, but if you say things that aren't true, I have to. There were Jewish people on the march on Saturday.
Okay. But the majority...
So they wouldn't be... You can't say they'd be scared to go, can you?
It is very scary. It is very
scary.
No,
I'm not disputing that you're scared. I'm just disputing your claim that it always erupts into violence and that Jewish people would be too scared to attend to demonstrate their sympathy for Palestinian people being killed. Because neither of those things are true.
No, what I'm not saying is that people can't march in solidarity, but the fact is it's a protest which ends up often being anti-Israel. There were 3 women who were wearing pictures
out of 100,000 people.
That's not the point. The point is that
it is. Of course, it's the point. Of course, it's the point, because you can call those people hateful, you can call those people insightful, but you can't call the march a hate march. because of
But
what
do you
3
hear
women
a difference
did.
between a march and a protest rather than a vigil or like solidarity? There's a big difference.
Well, you can call it whatever
One
you
ends
want.
up with hate. No, but there is a difference. You can't dispute that.
I can dispute anything I want.
Standing peacefully in vigil and market and thinking about the people that hurt the victims, etc. And absolutely, I think no one wants.
So it's
to
the
see
fact that
any
they're walking.
innocent civilians.
It's the fact that they're walking.
It's a much angry. It has a much angrier tone.
Well, there is huge anger about all the Palestinians being killed, just as there was huge anger about all the Israelis killed on October the 7th. You must have been angry. You must have been angry.
I was devastated.
Okay.
It was heartbreaking.
Well, I was angry.
It's a very different. Well, there's a very different.
I was very, very angry. I don't know if you heard the show. I was absolutely livid.
Yeah, but what were you angry about?
The murder of 1,400 Israelis.
But was that anger directed at the horrific terrorists?
Of course it was.
Was that compassion and devastation for the victims?
It was both. Unthinkable, unjustifiable, intolerable were the words that I used to describe what Hamas had done. Heartbreaking, utterly, utterly devastating were the words that I used to describe the victims. So why can't people? Why can't people be angry? Why can't people be angry about Palestinians being killed as well?
I just want to shout out that the first day that you did your show was brilliant. You were really compassionate, really kind, really sensitive, absolutely.
And really angry.
Yes, but I think there's more anger. What does I mean? It's about compassion and being devastated.
And being angry.
Do something.
And being angry. So if I'm allowed to be angry about the killing of Israelis, why can't I be angry about the killing of Gazans? Why can't people march in anger at the killing of Palestinians?
It's about compassion. That's the difference.
Okay. So how do people show their compassion?
Anger then says, who can I fight? Anger is who can I punish?
Well, and that's why I had to pick you up at the beginning on the claims that it always erupted into violence when it simply doesn't. So no one's really looking for a fight.
Anger.
No one's looking for a fight.
I don't mean violence I mean violence as in anger, and that leads on to who can I blame?
You can't, unfortunately. Suella Braverman might want to outlaw anger, but even she would struggle to pull that one off, Anna. You can't tell people what they can and can't be angry about any more than I would dream of telling you.
Absolutely, but we can have expectations.
Go on.
The anger then channels into anti-Israel.
Well,
that is what happens.
And then it becomes problematic. But until it does, it isn't.
But
and when you say anti-Israel, you could say anti-Israeli army, anti-Likud.
But that's not true.
Well, I don't know that you can read the minds of everybody.
Very interesting. I don't know if you've looked at the works of the late Rabbi Lord Jonathan Sachs.
I'm familiar with some of his work, yes.
He has an incredible video that he's explaining how sometimes actually anti-Zionism is the new anti-Semitism. How it's changed over from the Middle Ages.
You're going a little bit off message now because what we're talking.
You're saying that it's not anti-Israel. It's also
no,
anti-Semitic.
I'm not. I'm saying you can't read anybody's mind. There are plenty of people in Israel who've got huge problems with what is going on. Are they anti-Semitic?
And that's what I believe Suella Braverman.
Are they anti-Semitic?
No, people can have issues with the policies.
People can be angry about policies, and they can be Jewish, and they can be angry with Israeli policies, but you wouldn't dream of calling them anti-Semitic.
But I haven't heard any pro-Palestinian march that's come out to condemn Hamas.
Well, how much attention have you been paying? How many of them have you spoken to?
Plenty.
Really?
Yeah, it's very interesting having conversations.
But you were too frightened to attend.
An excuse.
You were too frightened to attend.
I would never go to a protest.
So when did you talk to them?
Other people.
So when did you talk to them?
I've spoken to individuals.
Yeah, when?
With their opinions.
When?
Over the last couple of weeks.
How?
And there's always an excuse.
But how have you spoken to these? How have you spoken? No, of course you can't. Not if you're going to come on my radio and say things that aren't true.
But it is true.
Well, of course it isn't. Every single
Ariana Grande concert.
Well, I don't want to imagine that. I'm not. I'm talking about marches. No, stop it.
I feel bad for the people that were killed, but
you're making stuff up again.
Very, very frustrated.
You're making stuff up again.
No, I'm not. That's the exact same parallel.
You're having an imaginary conversation about a completely different atrocity.
No, but what I'm saying to you is the fact is that there needs to be condemnation.
Just before you go, where is your expression? I know you would avail yourself of this opportunity, your compassion for the people being killed in Gaza now.
Absolutely. I said that straight away. I said that earlier on. I said, I do not want to see any innocent civilians, and it's horrific, and it's heartbreaking, and I read an article.
So would you call for it to end then?
I would call for Israel to do whatever it can to
Well, you
protect
can't
their
have it both
civilians.
ways, can you?
It's called self-defense.
Okay, well, that's not called compassion then.
What you just watched wasn't just a caller losing an argument, it was something much deeper than that. It was a perfect example of what happens when emotion tries to overpower reality and fails. Because Anna didn't come into that conversation with evidence. She came in with feelings, fear, anger, a sense of unease, and she tried to build an entire argument on top of that. But here's the problem. Feelings can be powerful, but they're not always accurate. And when they're not grounded in facts, they collapse the moment they're challenged. And that's exactly what James did. He didn't shout, he didn't escalate, he didn't try to win through emotion, he simply stayed calm, stuck to verifiable facts, and let the contradictions reveal themselves. And in doing that, he exposed something we see all the time in modern political discourse, what can only be described as performative compassion. That's when someone uses the language of empathy, words like heartbreaking or devastating, but then supports positions that lead to even more suffering. It sounds compassionate on the surface, but when you dig deeper, it doesn't hold up. And nowhere is that contradiction clearer than here. On one side, you have people marching loudly, yes, sometimes angrily, but calling for an end to the violence. On the other side, you have someone claiming the moral high ground while defending the continuation of that same violence under the label of self-defense. That tension, that contradiction, is the real story. Because true compassion isn't just something you say, it's something you demonstrate through what you support, what you oppose, and what you're willing to question. And James's final questions didn't just corner the argument, they exposed it. So now the question turns to you. What do you think real compassion looks like in a situation like this? Let me know in the comments below, and if you enjoyed this breakdown, make sure you like and subscribe for more.